Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Well, you found it. This is your underground source for uncompromising Bible study that's artisanal and fresh. I hope you'll join me all this week and next week as we study Psalm 98. Psalm 98 is a very long psalm. It's 50, how many verses? 53 verses long, 52 verses long. And we're going to be studying it this week and next. This week we'll look at the first 26 verses. And next week we'll be looking at the last 26 verses. And we'll try to cover the entire psalm as best we can. There's a lot here. And this is the last psalm in the third book of the Psalter. So this ends our third book of the Psalter. Psalm 90 begins the fourth book and is the first psalm in the fourth book of the Psalter. So I hope you'll join me in 2 weeks as we pick up Psalm 90. But we want to end out our third book of the Psalter here with Psalm 89. Psalm 89 is fascinating. It's beautiful. We have two voices here. We have the voice of the psalmist and the voice of the Lord. The voice of the psalmist begins here in the first two verses, 1 and 2, and then the Lord speaks in verses 3 and 4, breaking with the Selah. Then we have verses 5 through 18. The psalmist's voice is heard again as he extols the greatness of our God. And then in 19 through 26, the Lord's voice comes back again in this first section that I'm treating this week, and we have him closing out the section. So two voices. There are lots of very fascinating words that are used here, important words. In the entire psalm, we have the word for mercy used 8 times, but in our first section, the first 26 verses, we have it 5 different times. The Lord's name is used 9 times in the entire psalm. We have it 7 times just in the first section. And we have 2 words that are used for the Lord's name that are not the Tetragrammaton. We'll talk about those, one this week and one next. And we have David mentioned 4 times throughout the entire psalm. David, my servant, is mentioned. He's here twice in this first part, and we'll check out next week the other times that he's mentioned. David becomes an important figure here in Psalm 89. So this is written, and the superscript tells us another Maskil song, and this is not of Heman, but this happens to be of Ethan. Ethan the Ezrahite. Now we saw last time that one of the titles for Psalm 88 was Maskil of Heman the Ezrahite. Now we have Ethan. So we know that Heman and Ethan were both sons of Zerah, and if you were going to call Zerah's family, you would call them the Ezrahites. That's Erah's family's or clan's name. But it's probably not possible that this is Ethan that is being mentioned here, the Ethan of Judah's line, but because he's talking about David, he would never have known David, because the Ethan of Zerah's line grew up and lived in Egypt while they were in bondage, so he would never have known David. So this is probably a school of wisdom that is called after the name of Zerah. And so Ethan and Heman are men who are part of that school and are the ones who have created Psalm 88 and now Psalm 89. So here we have verse 1. I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make known thy faithfulness to all generations. For I have said, mercy shall be built up forever. Thy faithfulness shalt thou establish in the very heavens. I have made a covenant with my chosen. I have sworn unto David my servant. Thy seed will I establish forever, and build up thy throne to all generations. Selah. Well, there are the first 4 verses. We see the very first 2 verses of that psalm that I mentioned, that opening praise. And we have the psalmist's voice here, Ethan's voice here, telling us the Lord's faithfulness is great and endures to all generations. We've seen that before in Psalm 36, verse 5, that idea that his mercy and his faithfulness reaches to the very heavens. And then we have the Lord's voice here in verses 3 and 4, and something that comes very close to the covenant that was made with David there in 2 Samuel chapter 7. You notice verse 4 says, "Thy seed will I establish forever." Now this is the Lord speaking. "And build up thy throne to all generations." If you go back and look at 2 Samuel chapter 7, verses 12 through 16, you'll find that comes very close in a poetic way to what the Lord said to David on that day. So this is a repeat in a poetic way of the covenant that God made with David. So the Lord speaks here, and then, of course, that section ends with the Selah. The psalmist speaks this praise of faithfulness. The Lord speaks about the covenant he made with David. So what we can expect now after the Selah in verse 5 through 10 is more elaboration on the faithfulness and wonderful beauty of the Lord. Okay, we'll pick up right there again tomorrow on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.